Bullies messed with the black girl. Huge mistake. Minutes later, they were begging forgiveness. At 17, Amara Johnson had already learned what it meant to walk into a room and feel like she didn't belong. But nothing could have prepared her for the first morning she stepped through the towering glass doors of Riverside Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in Massachusetts. The marble floors gleamed like they had never been touched by dirt. The air smelled faintly of money and perfume, and every face that turned toward her carried the same expression: curiosity mixed with quiet judgment. Amara had come from a small public school across town, a place where no one cared what car you arrived in or how many generations your family name carried. At Riverside, everything was different. The students wore designer coats and shoes that cost more than her mother's monthly salary. Conversations drifted through the hallways about ski trips in Aspen and charity galas at city museums. And in the middle of all that privilege, Amara stood clutching a second-hand backpack and a transfer folder that still smelled faintly of printer ink. Her mother, Dr. Linda Johnson, had worked tirelessly to get her there. A respected biologist and single parent, she believed Riverside would open doors that public schools never could. "People will underestimate you," she had told Amara the night before classes began. "Let them. Just remember who you are." Those words echoed in Amara's mind as she navigated the maze of polished hallways, searching for her locker number and pretending she didn't feel every pair of eyes following her. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share a word of love in the comments. She wanted to blend in, to keep her head down and focus on the reason she was there: an athletic scholarship. What most of the school didn't know was that Amara was a state-level boxing and jiu-jitsu champion, a competitor with speed and discipline that had already drawn the attention of college scouts. But at her mother's request, she had agreed to keep that part of herself hidden for now. Dr. Johnson wanted her daughter to be seen as a scholar first, an athlete second. "You'll have time to show them what you can do," her mother had said. "For now, just be you." So Amara stayed quiet, moving carefully through her classes. She listened more than she spoke, earning polite smiles from teachers who didn't yet know what to make of her. A few students greeted her kindly, though most simply ignored her presence. But there were three who noticed, not out of curiosity, but out of something darker. Ethan Caldwell, tall, arrogant, and effortlessly charming, was the son of the city's millionaire mayor. He walked through the halls like he owned the place, his confidence inherited like an expensive suit. Ryan Blake, his constant shadow, was the loud one. His family owned one of the largest car dealership chains in the region. And Chase Donovan, quiet but cruel in subtler ways, came from a powerful law firm dynasty. Together, they ruled Riverside Academy like a private kingdom, their money and last names enough to make teachers hesitate and students obey. They noticed Amara almost instantly, not because she wanted attention, but because she didn't seek it. There was something about her composure that unsettled them, a quiet strength that didn't fit their world of shallow power plays. The first week passed in uneasy silence, the kind that comes before a storm. Whispers started about her scholarship, her neighborhood, her skin. They came disguised as jokes, light enough to sound harmless but sharp enough to wound. Amara heard them all. She just didn't react. Every time someone muttered something cruel, she smiled politely and continued walking. Every time someone accidentally bumped into her or questioned how she got in, she simply adjusted her backpack and kept moving. To most people, her silence looked like weakness. But it wasn't. It was control. After classes, she spent hours training in the basement of their small apartment, her fists pounding the heavy bag until her arms ached. It was her sanctuary, the only place she could release what she kept bottled inside. Her mother watched quietly from the kitchen, torn between pride and worry. Amara wasn't just strong. She was disciplined. But discipline couldn't protect her from cruelty. By the end of the week, the laughter grew louder. The same boys who barely noticed her on Monday were now making her their favorite target. A tripped foot in the hallway. Books knocked from her hands. A whispered insult followed by smirks. It was a pattern, deliberate, rehearsed. Yet Amara still didn't break. The other students noticed, too. Some pitied her, others filmed it on their phones. No one spoke up. That's how things worked at Riverside. Money decided who mattered, and Amara, despite her brilliance and quiet dignity, didn't make the list. But something about her unnerved Ethan and his friends. She wasn't reacting the way they wanted. There was no fear in her eyes, no trembling, no angry outburst. Just an unsettling calmness, the kind that hinted she was seeing further than they realized. One afternoon, as Amara walked past the main courtyard, she caught her reflection in the glass. Tall, poised, unshaken. Around her, laughter echoed. Inside, she made a silent promise. I will not break. Not here. Not for them. And from that moment, something began to shift. Because when a person who has endured silence finally decides to act, the world has no idea what's coming next. Riverside Academy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. By the second week at Riverside Academy, the whispers had evolved into open cruelty. The first incident happened in the cafeteria. Amara had just sat down with her tray when she noticed her milk carton leaking. A hole punctured deliberately at the bottom. As she reached to throw it away, laughter erupted behind her. Ethan Caldwell smirked from across the room, holding a pin between his fingers like a trophy. Accidents happen, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Amara didn't look up. She picked up her tray, dumped it in the bin, and walked out in silence. That moment was recorded not just on phones, but in memories. Because when she didn't react, when she didn't give them the satisfaction of anger, it bothered them more than any insult could. But the boys weren't done. Each day brought a new humiliation. Her textbooks disappeared from her locker, only to reappear drenched in sink water. Her name was scratched onto a cafeteria table beside a racial slur. Someone sprayed glue on her chair before class, and she spent the next period sitting motionless, refusing to show discomfort. She documented everything, photos, timestamps, screenshots. While the bullies laughed, Amara was quietly building a case. The teachers noticed, but no one wanted to challenge the sons of the town's most powerful families. Complaints got lost. Reports were under review. The principal, Mr. Whitman, gave her a polite smile and said, "We'll handle it internally." That was code for nothing will happen. Amara learned fast. In places built by privilege, silence was the currency of survival. Yet, there was something different about the way she carried herself. Her calmness wasn't surrender. It was calculation. Every insult, every sneer was fuel. At home, she trained harder than ever, her fists colliding with the punching bag until her knuckles turned raw. Her mother begged her to take a break, but Amara's eyes held a fire even she couldn't recognize anymore. Then came the breaking point. On Friday morning, she walked into the gym to find her locker vandalized. The words, "Go back where you belong," spray-painted in thick red letters. The stench of paint filled the air, sharp and suffocating. Her shoes were thrown into the trash. Her training gloves, the ones she'd saved for months to buy, were cut in half. The laughter from behind told her exactly who had done it. Ethan, Ryan, and Chase stood at the far end of the hall, pretending not to look. Amara didn't move. She took a deep breath, pulled out her phone, and began recording. Slowly, methodically, she filmed everything. The words, the damage, the faces reflected faintly in the locker's metal surface. It wasn't anger that moved her. It was purpose. Later that day, she sat outside under the bleachers, scrolling through her evidence folder. Dozens of pictures, messages, and clips. Enough to destroy reputations if used correctly. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. Revenge, she thought, was most powerful when delivered with precision. That's when Coach Raymond Harris, the school's physical education teacher, approached her. He was a retired Olympic boxing coach, a man who'd seen champions rise and fall. He had been watching Amara for days. The way she moved, the balance in her posture, the quiet fire she carried. "You fight," he said softly. It wasn't a question. Amara hesitated, unsure how to respond. The look in his eyes told her she didn't need to. "There's a way to show them who you are," he continued. "Not by hurting them, but by reminding them what real strength looks like." He explained his idea, a martial arts demonstration planned for the upcoming investors' meeting. Parents, donors, and local officials would attend. Officially, it was to showcase the school's athletic programs. Unofficially, it was an opportunity. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about what the coach had suggested. Was it revenge or justice? Maybe both. She replayed every moment in her mind. The laughter, the humiliation, the silence that followed. Then she rose quietly, changed into her training gear, and began to punch the air in rhythm. Each strike carried a memory, each breath a promise. Over the next few days, she trained like never before. After school, while others went to parties or study groups, she was in her basement, drenched in sweat, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. Her mother noticed but didn't stop her. "You've done everything right," Dr. Johnson said quietly one evening. "If this is what you need to do, then do it." Meanwhile, the bullies planned what they called Amara's last week. They were convinced she'd leave the school soon, too humiliated to stay. Ethan boasted to his friends that he'd make her snap before Friday. But what he didn't know was that Amara had already decided when and how the tables would turn. The days crawled by, tension thick in every hallway. Students began to whisper about the graffiti, the principal's silence, the rumors that Amara might be filing a complaint with the board. But no one knew what she was really planning. Then came Monday morning. Posters appeared across campus announcing the upcoming Riverside Investor Showcase, featuring a special athletic demonstration led by Coach Harris. No one paid much attention except Ethan, who laughed when he saw Amara's name listed. "This should be fun," he muttered. But behind that laughter was the first flicker of unease. Amara arrived that day wearing her usual calm expression. She walked through the halls like a shadow, eyes forward, hands steady. Every step carried quiet defiance. Every second brought her closer to the moment she'd been waiting for. She knew the truth was a blade best revealed in daylight, and soon the whole world would see what happened when power met accountability. The countdown had begun. By the time Friday arrived, no one at Riverside could imagine how much their perfect world was about to unravel. Because in just a few minutes, 3 boys who thought they ruled everything were going to watch everything they stood for collapse. And it would start with one girl who refused to break. Friday arrived cloaked in tension. The air at Riverside Academy buzzed with anticipation. The gymnasium, polished, bright, and echoing with chatter, had been transformed for the Investor Showcase, the school's biggest event of the year. Rows of chairs filled the space, occupied by wealthy parents, city investors, and local officials. At the center sat Mayor Caldwell, proud and smiling, his son Ethan lounging a few rows behind him, surrounded by friends who still believed they were untouchable. Amara stood backstage, her hands steady despite the pounding of her heart. Coach Harris gave her a nod, not of command, but of respect. He didn't need to remind her what was at stake. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. A truth too heavy for silence, too powerful to stay hidden. The lights dimmed, and the principal stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to celebrate Riverside Academy's excellence. Today, we'll begin with a special athletic demonstration led by one of our students." He paused as if for effect. "Please welcome Amara Johnson, state-level martial arts champion." Gasps rippled through the audience. Ethan's smirk vanished. The same girl he had mocked, shoved, and humiliated was now walking confidently toward the mat, the spotlight chasing her every step. Amara's movements were calm, deliberate, the kind that commands silence. She bowed to the coach, adjusted her gloves, and faced the 3 volunteer wrestlers lined up across from her. They were seniors, bigger and older, confident they could make this look like a harmless demonstration. Coach Harris gave a short whistle, and the first match began. The first boy lunged. She sidestepped, pivoted, and brought him down in a single, fluid motion. The crowd gasped. The second lasted only seconds longer, caught in a perfect sweep and pinned before he even realized what happened. The third, heavier and faster, came charging in with all his strength. Amara ducked low, used his momentum, and flipped him clean over her shoulder. The thud echoed like a gunshot. The gym erupted. Cheers, applause, disbelief. The same students who had once filmed her humiliation were now filming her triumph. But Amara wasn't done. She stood, breathing evenly, and turned toward the microphone. The applause faded as she reached for her tablet, her expression unreadable. "Before we move on," she said softly, "I'd like to talk about something else the school is known for." The principal stiffened. Coach Harris folded his arms, watching silently. Amara connected the tablet to the projector. Within seconds, the massive gym screen flickered, and the first image appeared. Her locker was vandalized with red spray paint. Then the cafeteria table was carved with slurs. Gasps filled the air. Another slide, a video clip from a hallway camera. Ethan Caldwell's voice, mocking her, surrounded by laughter. "At least this time they didn't send an ugly monkey," he sneered. The audience froze. Parents turned pale. Teachers exchanged horrified glances. The mayor rose halfway from his chair, his expression collapsing from pride to shock. Amara continued, her tone calm but unflinching. "This is what your sons, your students, and your leaders have been teaching us. That silence is safer than truth. That power protects cruelty." Clip after clip rolled. The glue in her backpack, the water-soaked books, the messages calling her names. Her evidence unfolded like a courtroom exhibit, each piece undeniable. The gym, once filled with laughter, now drowned in silence. Ethan shot to his feet, shouting, "That's not!" But the next slide cut him off. A selfie he and his friends had taken, laughing beside her vandalized locker. The crowd turned on him instantly. Phones rose in the air, recording every second. Mayor Caldwell's face went red with rage. Not at Amara, but at his son. "Ethan," he muttered under his breath, barely audible. "What have you done?" Amara stood in the center of the mat, her chin lifted. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice trembling slightly but steady enough to echo through the hall. "It's about every student who's been silenced because they didn't come from money. Every kid told to stay quiet because the truth might inconvenience someone powerful." Her words hit harder than any punch she'd ever thrown. The principal grabbed the microphone, stammering about an investigation. But it was too late. The truth was already viral. Dozens of students had uploaded the footage within minutes. The story was out, unstoppable. Mayor Caldwell stepped forward, his voice breaking through the stunned crowd. "You've disgraced this school and this city," he shouted at his son, his anger raw, public, unfiltered. "You've disgraced me." Ethan's face drained of color. Ryan and Chase sat frozen, their fathers already moving toward the exits, phones buzzing as reporters began calling. Amara didn't smile. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a deep, exhausted peace. She turned back to the microphone one last time. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," she said quietly. "I came here to make sure no one else has to live through this." The gym fell silent. Even the sound of breathing seemed too loud. And then, the applause started, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Teachers stood. Parents rose. Students who had once ignored her now cheered until the walls shook. Amara stepped down from the mat, her head high, her heartbeat steady. The bullies she once feared were now powerless, their empire of cruelty crumbling under the weight of their own actions. As she walked past Ethan, he turned away, his face buried in his hands. His father sat motionless, realizing that in one afternoon, everything he'd built, power, pride, reputation, had been shattered by the truth his own son tried to bury. Coach Harris met her by the exit, pride glinting in his tired eyes. "You did it," he whispered, but Amara shook her head. "No," she said softly. "The truth did." Outside, the autumn wind was cold against her face. Somewhere inside, chaos was erupting, suspensions, investigations, consequences. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because for the first time since she arrived at Riverside Academy, Amara Johnson was finally free. And the world had just learned what happens when silence finds its voice. In the days that followed, Riverside Academy was unrecognizable. The once untouchable school that had turned a blind eye to privilege and cruelty now found itself at the center of national attention. The footage from the investor showcase spread like wildfire. News outlets replayed it on every channel. Social media lit up with outrage, and people across the country demanded accountability. The story of the girl who exposed the bullies became more than gossip. It became a movement. Within 48 hours, the school board announced an emergency meeting. The principal was suspended for negligence. An independent investigation was launched, and every parent in the district wanted to know how such darkness had been allowed to fester behind marble walls. Donations from sponsors were frozen, and the very investors who once applauded the school's reputation now distanced themselves from it completely. As for the three boys, Ethan, Ryan, and Chase, the fallout was swift and merciless. Their families' names, once symbols of power, became headlines of disgrace. Ethan's father, Mayor Caldwell, lost his re-election campaign after the video of his son's racial remarks went viral nationwide. He stood before reporters, his voice trembling with regret, saying, "My son's actions reflect a failure in my own values." The dealership empire Ryan's father built began to collapse under the weight of boycotts. And Chase Donovan's father watched his law firm's biggest clients walk away, unwilling to be associated with a name now synonymous with privilege and hate. For Amara, life at Riverside changed overnight. She went from invisible to unstoppable. Students who had once whispered behind her back now approached her with quiet gratitude. Some apologized. Others simply said, "Thank you." The school invited her to join the student council, and within months, she was elected its president. She used that platform not for power, but for purpose, starting a self-defense and mentorship program for younger students, especially those who felt unseen or unprotected. Coach Harris became her biggest supporter, often watching her classes from the sidelines with quiet pride. "She's done more in 6 months than I've done in 15 years, he told the new principal one afternoon, watching Amara teach a group of freshmen how to fall, rise, and strike back, not just in combat, but in life. Riverside Academy slowly began to heal. The graffiti was painted over, but the memory remained, not as a scar, but as a lesson. The students started conversations that had never been allowed before. Assemblies were held on race, empathy, and privilege. For the first time, the school felt human. And in the center of that transformation stood a girl who refused to let hate define her. 6 months later, on a gray, rain-soaked afternoon, Amara was walking to her car when a familiar voice called her name. She turned to see Mayor Caldwell standing by the parking lot, drenched but determined. He looked older, smaller somehow. A man stripped of pride but holding something heavier, guilt. He approached her slowly and said, "I failed as a father. You taught him what I couldn't teach in 18 years. Amara studied him for a moment, her eyes calm and kind. "It's never too late to do the right thing," she said quietly. That single sentence would change him. In the months that followed, the former mayor began volunteering at youth centers across the city, creating programs focused on education, awareness, and accountability. And eventually, his son Ethan joined him. It didn't happen overnight, redemption never does. But they began to understand what true strength looked like. At graduation, Amara was named valedictorian. As she stood at the podium, the gym fell silent once more. But this time, it wasn't fear or tension that filled the air. It was respect. Her speech wasn't about revenge. It was about resilience. When I first came here, she began, I thought staying quiet would keep me safe. I thought silence was strength. But I learned that silence is what allows injustice to breathe. Real strength comes from standing tall, even when your voice shakes, from choosing dignity over anger, truth over comfort, and courage over fear. The crowd rose to their feet, tears glistening in the eyes of teachers, students, and parents alike. In the back row, Mayor Caldwell and Ethan clapped, not out of obligation but out of understanding. 2 years later, Amara earned a full scholarship to Columbia University, majoring in law with a focus on civil rights advocacy. When Coach Harris visited her before retirement, he smiled and said, You didn't just change a few boys, Amara. You changed generations. Her story became one that teachers used in classrooms, one that parents told their children, and one that reminded people everywhere that even the smallest voice can echo louder than hate. Because in a world where racism still hides behind privilege, silence, and fear, Amara Johnson proved that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it speaks calmly, fearlessly, and with unshakable truth. She didn't fight with fists. She fought with courage. And she showed the world that the greatest revenge isn't humiliation. It's transformation. So the question isn't what Amara did. The real question is, if you witnessed injustice today, would you have the courage to stand up, even when no one else does? Because change doesn't start with power. It starts with one person who refuses to stay silent. If the story moved you, take a moment to think about it. What would you have done if you were in Amara's place? Would you have stayed silent or stood up the way she did? Her courage reminds us that one voice can truly change everything. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel ***, and turn on notifications ***, so you never miss the next story that challenges, inspires, and speaks truth to power. Your support helps keep these voices alive.